The American workplace is changing, from revolutions in technology to the ability and the desire to work from home. It all leads us to a profound and critical question for society. What is the future of work? Today is Sunday, July 11, 2021, and this is Flashpoint. Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. I'm so glad you're with us this morning as you enjoy the weekend. Chances are you get a two-day weekend. You probably wouldn't mind one more day off. You know, it was an interesting study that came out last week. It was a study done in Iceland where researchers found that people who worked a 4-day work week were happier, but also more productive. Now, I chewed on that a bit and realized that we are talking a lot about work right now as more and more employees lobby for the ability to work from home, as they did for much of the last year and a half. We keep talking about the help wanted signs and the businesses struggling to find workers. We fight over the minimum wage. We've got a generation of Americans so saddled with college debt that many of them can't see how they ever get paid up. We also have a generation of young Americans who aren't sure they'll be able to ever achieve the standard of living their parents had. Meanwhile, technology keeps shuffling the deck. I don't need a bank teller. I've got my phone. I don't need a travel agent. I've got my phone. I don't even need to go to the store. I've got my phone. It starts to sound like the only reliable job is designing and making phones. Every once in a while, we devote an entire program to a single issue, and this is one that has fascinated me for several years. What is the future of work? It's today on Flashpoint. As we talk about the future of work, there are really two tracks here. The immediate changes we're watching brought on by the pandemic. We're going to talk about those coming up. But first, the broader questions, basic matters like, what are people going to do? Is there enough work for everyone? And how do we prepare ourselves for it? Alfred Young is the Associate Director at the University of Michigan Center for Social Solutions. Mike Chico is the President and CEO of FANUC America. And Matt Anderson is the Curator of Transportation at the Henry Ford, which of course is in so many ways dedicated to the history of work. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being here. Alfred, I want to start with you. I find myself wondering whether we really are at some sort of tipping point when we wonder about the future of work, or is this the same argument that we've had really since the dawn of the steam age, when we started thinking that machines were going to replace manpower and that this is really a problem we've faced forever? Or is it particularly acute because of things and changes that are in the world right now?
Well, in some sense, it is a long-standing problem. Technology has been a part of our world since the industrial age, and there's always been some interest and for some people concern about what the future of work might mean as technology unfolds. I think we're at a critical point today, however, because technology is promoting change at a faster rate. Yeah. So what might have taken decades or years to change in the past now changes within months, within a year. And that creates a new levels of anxiety as well as possibility for people.
That's the way it feels to me, too. I think technology is constant, but our ability to spread technology has gotten so much faster that people can jump on and innovate much more quickly than they used to, just because of the way that communication in the computer age has brought us closer together, right?
Indeed. And technology has also created less of an opportunity for certain people to see themselves as relating to work. Yeah. So even in an earlier moment in industry, technological change involved people thinking, here's where I fit in. Here's where I'll drive that machine, or here's where I'll work in that plant. Today, so much technology is such that people are removed from work, don't often see a space for themselves around technology, and that exacerbates the anxiety.
And Mike Chico at FANUC, you see this question come up all the time. You make robots, you create automated systems that have created, obviously, so much progress in a technological sense for manufacturing. And yet I think a lot of people think that you're putting folks out of work that way. I think you see the opposite, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely, Devin. I mean, from our point of view, what the automation really does is it makes companies more productive. It takes the dull and dangerous and dirty jobs out of the factory. But as Alfred knows very well, what we need to do is we need to create a new pipeline of new manufacturing workers that will allow them to work in that factory environment with that technology. And so we're hard at work right now creating that pipeline. So in parallel with providing the automation that makes factories more efficient. And we're doing that at a much more rapid pace. As Alfred said, we're in parallel creating that pipeline of workers by putting that technology into schools at all levels of schools, even down into the elementary level of schooling, where we're teaching kids at a young age what the new level of manufacturing is going to be.
For decades and decades in America, Mike, people could walk out of high school and walk into a plant the next day and have a job ready for them on a line. I'm not sure that kind of job is going to still be around, or is it?
Well, Devin, I actually would disagree. I think that it is, and it certainly is happening right now, where we have real robots, real industrial robots at the high school level in over 1,300 schools across the United States. So within 1,300 schools across the United States, there are real industrial robots teaching kids, even at the high school level, how that works. And it's happening right now in conjunction with many, many companies, especially here in Michigan. Many of the tier suppliers are working in conjunction with those high schools to provide the automation and prep high school kids to walk right out of high school, and not only just into a job into a factory, but a much more rewarding and a much more higher paying job than just working in some of the dull, dirty spots that were available before.
Which it's going to have to be, I guess, given the number of jobs that we're watching going unfilled right now as people wait for better gigs to come along. Matt, at the Henry Ford, as you look at sort of the scope of history, do you tend to agree that technology tends to create as much work as it displaces?
I think there's some truth in that, and we can compare the current upheavals in the meaning of work to what was going on 100 years ago when Ford Motor Company was pioneering its moving assembly line process, which required fluid movement of work to workers and controlling the environment in which automobiles, in that case, were assembled. But it also required removing a lot of the skill from the production of automobiles. Workers were now essentially just one more piece in the machine, tightening one screw, fixing one bolt day after day. And workers then is now wanted fulfilling jobs, mentally and spiritually fulfilling, really. And the assembly line sort of took all of that away, which was an unintended consequence in that workers began not showing up for work. Absenteeism soared at Ford. The turnover rate was something like 380% after the moving assembly line, which inspired Ford to introduce the $5 a day, improving the wage to essentially give workers enough money to trade off the disappointments that came with the moving assembly line.
As you look toward what you're seeing happen in the future, then, do we see those kind of, I mean, you're talking about things that really held the worker in good stead long term. Mike just mentioned that people will come to understand that these are higher, better paying jobs than they used to be in manufacturing. Is that the way you see it, or do we still have way too much profit pressure pushing things down?
No, I think there is an opportunity for increased wages and improved way of life. Really, much of our prosperity through the 20th century was built on the foundation of the assembly line and the gains in productivity that it brought that allowed things that were previously luxuries to become everyday household goods. And of course, the side benefit was that it gave workers now enough of a wage to be able to purchase those things. So essentially, your employees become your own customers in a pleasant cycle. And we may have reached the limit of what that can achieve here in the 21st century, but undoubtedly technology is going to come that's going to introduce new ways that we can sustain our way of life in the United States.
Alfred, as we debate things like a universal basic minimum income, and of course this was particularly acute as we've watched the stimulus payments, which some people felt was an admission that there needs to be some sort of standard of living for people when times are hard. What does that tell us? That some people would say that sort of is an admission that it's really hard to put everybody to work in a meaningful way.
Well, what's hard for people who are struggling to find work, I'm talking about some of the lesser skilled individuals, some of the people who we might refer to as fragile workers, is they feel a stronger sense of insecurity about long-term connection to work. So I think what's at stake for us, in the short run, payments to provide the means for people to survive the current crisis, important to do. What that triggers is that as a nation, we must commit to helping people understand how they can relate in long-term and consistent fashion to work, because that's what's at stake for them.
Yeah.
Great anxiety is, will I fit in?
Mike, when you talk to the folks that are your customers, do you sense an obligation or a sense of obligation to what's best for society and what's best for the workplace, or is it really their obligation is at productivity, and that it's as simple as that, the equation?
No, I think that our customers do feel a sense of connection to the employees. And I sense that because when we started this movement towards training the next generation of manufacturing worker, as I mentioned, we started at the school level. We started at technical colleges. We started at training centers. We started at the high school level. But more and more what's happening is, as Alfred mentioned, you have all the existing employees at the factories that want to feel that connection. And if they were working in an area that was dull or dirty or dangerous, and now they see that area becoming automated, we need to offer them the ability to go through an upskilling process, to go through and learn a new skill and feel the connection. And we need to do that at many different skill levels. All of it is going to elevate the skill a little bit, or a lot, depending on the person. But I think that the employees, we hear it all the time, is that we need to find a way to upskill our labor. And so I think the end users really do feel that connection, and they want to maintain the workforce, but we need to find new skills for those workers to increase the productivity.
We've got this situation right now where we have almost as many people looking for work as there are jobs to fill. Where you are right now, can you find all the people you need at Fanuc right now?
I mean, fortunately, where Fanuc is we sit in one of the most highly automated, skilled from a personnel standpoint. Some of the best schools and universities are putting out some of the most excellent people throughout the industry. We have some of the best community colleges in the area putting out people, and then we have one of the most diverse manufacturing workforces. So we are finding the right people, but it is becoming more and more challenging. And we hear from our customers all the time of, we wish we could do more, but we just can't find the people. And everyone knows this, the robots can only do so much. We can only automate so much. We're automating really the most repetitive parts of the factory, and the human element is always going to be a critical part of any part of manufacturing. And so I think that we need to come to a better balance in terms of the way we do automated manufacturing.
Mike, I know that's hopeful for a lot of people to hear. Mike, Alfred, Matt, thanks so much for the thoughts. Great start to this conversation. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll boil it down to what we're seeing right now, the impact of the pandemic that will last much longer than the pandemic. This is Flashpoint on Local 4.